Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Fire Eyes Media.
Hi, friends. For those of you who've been here a while, you might remember an episode we did about a certain fake hitman for hire website. In that episode, I mentioned my great-great-uncle, Fiore Buccieri, who was a member of the Chicago outfit from the 1920s through the 1960s. The outfit, of course, was run by infamous mobsters like Sam Giancana and Al Capone. If you haven't listened to it, we highly recommend you do so, and we'll put the episode link in the show notes. Okay, why am I talking about this old episode? Well, I recently had the absolute privilege of chatting with Kyle Tekiela, the creator of the hit podcast, Crook County, and we are so excited to share our conversation with y'all today.
In Crook County, Kyle shares the story of his father, Kenny the Kid Tekiela, and his alleged rise through the ranks of the Chicago outfit, a legendary organized crime syndicate. The wildest part? Kyle and his family had no idea his father was leading a double life as both a firefighter and a hitman until Kyle was well into adulthood. In an attempt to process this staggering revelation, Kyle hit record and turned his personal journey into a riveting story for the world to hear.
Kyle is incredibly open about the emotional toll this revelation has had on his family, and we wanted to dig a little deeper into his decision to share this story, the production process, and the impact it's had on him so far. The 8th episode of this series came out last week, but Kyle has a ton of bonus interviews and content to share. So be sure to listen to Crook County wherever you get your podcasts and follow Kyle on Instagram and Twitter. Yes, I said Twitter. I won't call it X. At Crook County Podcast.
Before we play the interview, please go leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening. Positive feedback helps us get noticed by the big podcast bosses and gives us the opportunity to have more interesting chats like this one. Also, be sure you're following us on Instagram and TikTok at Weird True Crime. Subscribe on Patreon for just $2 a month for ad-free episodes at patreon.com/weirdtruecrime.
Until next time, stay safe.
And make good choices. Bye.
Bye. I'm curious to know, what were your emotions? Like, what was the experience finding out all of this stuff about your dad? And was there a specific moment that made you realize that you wanted to share this story?
Well, it's a very complicated set of emotions. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack. First off, he's a father that I have basically separated myself from for years because of heroin addiction and, drama within the family. So, when he drops a bomb like this, it's like, what is this now? It's almost disbelief and disconnect, and your instinct is to just wave it off as more bullshit. But as he got clean over the years and he continued telling me more stories and they got clearer and more defined and with more detail, you realize that I guess this is real, and now I have to process that. So it's a long process of processing, which I think helped me kind of really understand it and deal with it in a healthy way as opposed to an unhealthy knee-jerk reaction type way.
I love that. So, I mean, you started recording these conversations you had with him, what, like 9 years ago? So, did you start recording those conversations knowing that you wanted to do something with it? Or were you recording it more for your own benefit and then realized you wanted to do something with it later?
Yeah, the first few years starting in 2013, they were just oral stories. And then I'm like, I need this written down. So I gave him an iPad and I had him write it down. And then as he started writing, his mind started opening up to all these other things that were
Mm-hmm.
happening. Like it just the tunnel was open, like transported back to that time period that he had blocked out for so long. And then and the way he would tell the story is so much better than the way you read the story because he's very charismatic. And I'm like, I got to record this. And so then I started recording it again. Not I didn't listen to podcasts at this time. This wasn't a thing that I was expecting to put on TV or whatever. It was just really like a family, I guess photo album, an audio photo album, because I was
Mm-hmm.
also collecting photos from other family members and stuff. And at this point, um, I had a new son, and so I was trying to, I was invested in understanding where I came from. So all these two things kind of came together at the same time, with him telling me his history and me kind of trying to discover who we were, as a family and a family name, and it just magically kind of came together in 2017 when I heard Up and Vanished season one, and I could see what it could be like. I felt like that was just a random thing that I stumbled across. Someone maybe told me about it, and the production value that Payne put into it was what really clicked it for me. Obviously this isn't a discovery of a murder, and I'm not trying to like find the killer. It's a completely different story, but the production value and the way that Payne tells his stories, that's what
Yeah.
inspired me to kind of turn this into a thing.
So, did you know then that I want to work with Pain and be part of Tenderfoot as I do
No,
this? Was that just
they
like,
were just the
no,
inspiration,
got it?
but it eventually kind of worked itself out because I love the music in that, in Up and
Mm-hmm.
Vanished, and that's done by a guy named Matthew Pusty, who goes by Makeup and Vanity Set. That's his stage name.
Yeah.
And I was producing a movie at the time, and I wanted him to score the movie, and so I reached out to Matt and said, "Hey, dude, I love your work on Up and Vanished. I would love for you to audition to score the movie that I'm producing right now." And we became kind of buddies. And then I'm like, by the way, I've been putting together this little pilot for a podcast. You should check it out. So he listened to it. And he's like, "This is insane. Can I bring it to the Tenderfoot guys?" I was like, "Sure." And that's how that all kicked off. So
Wow.
it all just kind of came together in a really weird, natural way.
That's amazing. It seems very kismet. Like it was just kind of
Yeah.
supposed to work out that way. And by the way, the music on the show is incredible. I'm not one to sit there and listen to like the end credits of a song, but that song is so powerful. I listen to it every time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that song was written about this stuff. So
Wow.
um and that's another thing too. Like, I wasn't planning on scoring this with original music. I wasn't even planning on having original music until, in my life until 2021 or 2022. And during the COVID, lull, I was like, I'm gonna start a band. And so and it just and all this stuff was happening at the same time. So yeah, like everything just kind of came together at the right time. And it's I'm pretty proud of it. It's very cool.
Y- You absolutely should be. It's incredible and it's everywhere, which I'm sure is very weird and awesome to see. You're probably like, oh, okay, well, I did this thing and now it's literally everywhere. And so
Yeah,
I'm
I was
sure
not
it's been a
expecting
whirlwind.
that. For sure. When you create something, I mean, you have a show, when you create something, you
Yeah.
want it to get out there, you want it to be embraced, but you never, like, I've been in the business long enough in Hollywood that those pipe dreams of, whatever, fame and fortune and like to hitting that grand slam, you rarely see it actually come to reality. It's such like a lottery draw. And so I just wanted this to reach like a moderate audience and just get it out there and enjoy it. But it's gone crazy. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't even know what to say. People like you are reaching out, wanting to interview me. It's just very bizarre.
So, did you have any reservations about putting this story out there? Were there any parts of your
Yeah,
dad's past that you struggled to confront and you're like, do I really want to share this? Or, you know,
of course. There's a lot of things that are left on tape that are not in the show for those
yeah,
very reasons. And in episode 3, I kind of lay out the ground rules for the rest of the season, where I say, we're not going to put in any real names. We're going to obscure some of the details here and there. We want to make sure the story makes sense, but like, there's no point in risking anything in my life for a show, for anything in entertainment, you know? Um, so I'm not young and dumb, and I'm not risky enough to do that. And I've got a family to protect. And so, yeah, I did what I felt was necessary in the show to feel safe.
Yeah, and it still feels like it's very vulnerable and open, and you still share so much of the story. So it's not like anybody's really missing out on anything. So it's good that you still feel comfortable in what you shared, but we're getting a good look as
Yeah.
well. So I think
The
it's a great
story's there.
balance.
You could totally grasp everything that went down without those details. So, and that's
Absolutely.
crazy. It's like I'm getting a lot of like there's very few people that have, publicly complained about the show. There's a couple Reddit threads and people are like, is this real? Is this not real? And they're like, the complaint is, oh, there's unverified information. Well, like I'm not going to tell you whether I verified anything or not because that's part of the safety part of this. You know what I mean? It's a
Mm-hmm.
story and you can enjoy the story for what it is, or you can hate on it for whatever reason you want. But what I can tell you is that this is true and that you're only hearing what I want you to hear because I don't feel like having the heat on my own family.
Nor should you. There's so many people that are going to complain for whatever reason. It's like, okay, cool. Think what you want, but I know it's true. And that's really all that matters. So,
100%.
you know, so how did your family feel about your decision to put this out there?
Well, obviously, also hesitation. I'm more in control of it, and I understand the landscape more, and I knew what I was going to do from the beginning.
Mhm.
But my wife was a little freaked out until I explained it all to her, and she got the gist of it. She understood what I was going to do, and then Ken's brother Rich, who appears in episode
Yeah.
5, he was a little freaked out too about it. It took a while to wrangle him and get him to interview because he was worried about repercussions or whatever. But again, I explained to him, and he got the deal. And at the end, everyone came around, and that's why they're in the show.
Did any of their reactions to you doing this influence the way that you told the story?
No, I mean it was a pretty easy kind of collaborative experience with anybody. I didn't have to really force anybody to do anything. And once you get the mic in front of them and you start talking, it's amazing
Mhm.
the kind of things like they probably weren't planning on saying a certain thing, but it just comes out anyway because it's an environment that they feel comfortable in. And at the end of the day, like, secrets take on this like weird supernatural kind of feel. And if you hold on to these secrets, they get bigger and bigger and bigger in your head and they feel more weighty in your and on your consciousness, and it's almost
Mhm.
like it's this this bully that's holding you down. But as soon as you let that thing go, you realize, oh my god, there's no reason I should have been holding that in the first place. I feel so much better now. It's a very cathartic experience, and I feel like everyone that I've interviewed had that cathartic experience, on tape, where they were realizing that they were saying these things that they were going to die without ever telling anybody. And it's pretty wild. It's one of those things. I've been doing documentaries for a long time, and that's one of the, I think, the most rewarding things about doing a documentary is because I'm usually interviewing the people, and it's like having these conversations and watching them open up and realizing like, oh, it's okay to tell this, actually.
Mhm.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you pull the word right out of my head, cathartic. I'm sure for a lot of them, it's like, oh, it feels so good to just finally talk about this and get it out
Hmm.
there and not just have it constantly weighing on me anymore. It's like, cool, it's
Yeah.
out there. We can move on now.
Yeah, and
So,
I'm getting voice memos. I have this thing. You can go to the website, crookcountypodcast.com, and you can
mhm.
leave a voicemail. And people have been leaving me voicemails, and a lot of them are like, I've done things in my life I'm not proud of, and I was never planning on telling my kids, but the way that you handled it with your family, it inspires me to maybe, tell things that I would never tell before, or like people that have battled with addiction and are ashamed of it or whatever, are now like opening up and feel like empowered to open up about their own addiction stories because of what they're hearing on our show. So I think that's the surprise. I think that has just been made this so rewarding is hearing people that I've never met before, be inspired to better their lives because of Crook County, which is wild.
that's got to be so fulfilling. But it's true. You listen to it and you're like, okay, these people are battling these really deep topics that haven't been talked about for years. And if they can
Hmm.
do it, why, there's no reason why I shouldn't. And as a parent, if you think about it, trying to hold back a lot of those things that you might not necessarily like about yourself and you don't want your kids to know about you isn't always the best way to go about it. Because if they understand your story and what you've been through and how you grew from it, it helps them too. So I think
Absolutely.
there's a lot of power in that, for
100%.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the reasons I did this in the first place was to be able to share it with my kid when he's old enough. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that day when I can sit down with him and let him listen to this.
that's going to be a whole new level of emotion, I can
Oh yeah.
imagine.
I
Yeah,
think it's nice. It's nice for because he's he's a little bit spoiled. Let's be honest. I live a
mine
I've done
too.
well for myself and I live a pretty good life, and the kid gets whatever he wants for the most part, and which was the opposite. I mean, I had a good life too, but we were definitely lower class growing up, and I felt like I had a good life at least. But this kid lives a completely different life than I lived. That's 100% true, and so it'll be good for him to have like a really solid grasp of where we came from and how hard it was to dig ourselves out of the hole that we came from,
Hmm.
and for him to maybe have a little bit more respect for where he is in life and where he comes from.
Yeah, I love that. You're preaching to the choir. We have those same conversations all the time. Like, y'all have it so much better than we ever did. Like, if you
Yeah.
only knew. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that. So, how has telling the story helped you process any of your kind of unresolved emotions or like the complicated relationship that you had with your dad?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it gives it a finish line. It gives it a place to put it and leave it, and instead of it just like constantly be like floating around in my head. Like it's like I've got put a nice pretty bow on it, and I'm proud of it now, and I can move on from it and reference it whenever I need to, or it helps make me a stronger person. Helps me. It's a touchstone in my life to always reference and say, okay, things could be a lot worse, or
Hmm.
I need to remember not to act this way. When it comes to raising my kid or being a husband. So yeah, it's always going to be there, but I think it's become a very positive influence on my life as opposed to it being previously a negative one.
That's huge. I'm very
Hmm.
happy to hear that it's kind of turned around and you can look at it from a good aspect instead of such a bad one. That's got to be a huge weight off your shoulders as well.
Yeah, and for everyone else in the family, my brother, my mom,
Hmm.
even my dad, him being able to tell that story and get that weight off of his back, there's nothing left to hide now. And so we can have honest conversations for the first time at all, and basically since I was, born.
Yeah.
Once he started telling me this stuff, it was still hard for him, and I still had to drag a lot of this stuff out. But now that it's out there in the world, and his secret is no longer a secret, and people are, across the country are reaching out and saying, "Wow, this is crazy," and getting value from it, he feels lighter too. So it's great. It's great for everybody.
I'm so glad. So, do you feel like putting this out there has kind of given everybody a sense of control or closure
Yeah,
about what happened or any other feelings about it?
yeah. It's not a magical cure all.
No.
Everyone still has their own problems that they need to deal with, but yes, this huge monkey is off of everyone's back now, and they're excited to share it with their friends too, and like people are blown away. People that they've known their entire lives never knew any of this stuff either. So they've had people reaching out like from high school, like, oh my God, I had no idea that this is what you went through. From my mom, that's a big thing. Like she's like getting a lot of sympathy from people because she went through a really hard time, and
Hmm.
our family fell apart, and people were wondering what the hell is going on over at the Tequila house, like fucking dysfunction. So now there's an explanation, and I think that has helped everybody kind of heal a bit, and find
Hmm.
closure. So yeah.
It's weird. You don't really think about people outside of the situation, but it's true. Like when you see somebody you care about struggling, but you don't necessarily know why, it's kind of like, okay, I
Hmm.
know that things are falling apart for you, but I don't know why. And so I don't know how to help you or what to say or whatever. So I'm
Yeah.
sure for them, it's given them so much clarity to understand what was going on at the time. So yeah, you don't really think about it from that perspective, but that's true.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
How do you take care of your mental health while working on this over the years, learning all of this information, spending all of the time it took to put together the podcast? How do you take care of yourself during that process?
Lots of wine. It's because the process was so elongated, I guess, over many, many years, it was easy for me to do it in little bites, as opposed to trying to do it all at once. And so, yeah, as every episode, it was like, I would do these interviews and it'd be 2, 3 hours long. And then, you kind of like, put that hard drive away for a little bit. And so you kind of forget all the little details. Like you understand the grasp of it, what they're saying, but all the little details and little nuances and the little phrases that people say, you're rediscovering them when you start to edit them, a year or
Mhm.
2, 3 years later. And so it's this really amazing experience because it's like seeing everything and hearing it for the first time. And because you've already heard it, you're able to digest it in a much more thorough way the second time around. And creating the story, and creating the edits and putting the pieces together, everything becomes a lot more clear. So it's like you're able to see the story for the first time in its full scope. And that is an amazing thing. Like that's one of the beautiful things about editing in general. I've been an editor for a really long time, and like taking all these little pieces and putting the puzzle together and seeing that puzzle for the first time is just like this incredible experience. And when that puzzle is your own family, that makes it even more, valuable.
That makes me think of another question. So during the editing process, how did you decide how you wanted to pace your story and like what you wanted to put in each episode and kind of how you wanted it to progress?
Someone told me a long time ago that God has the best timeline, which basically means like you start at the beginning and you end at the end. But obviously, that's not the case in this story. So you use that as your starting point. I wanted to start somewhere near the beginning. But I ended up starting in the middle, which is weird. But I think, you take the pieces and you're staring at all these pieces and that you've put together in your investigations and your interviews and your brain just starts doing stuff. And I've been doing it long enough where my like I can't even explain it, but like my brain will just be like this plus this equals this, and that should go right there. And then you do it, and then you do it again with the next couple pieces, and then eventually things start to come together. It's this very like you're like a blind man kind of, reaching for bricks and trying to build a house. And if you've done it long enough, you can feel what you're doing. It becomes clear easier than you think. So, but it's just time. It's time in the edit, time with the material, and kind of trust your instincts and go down weird paths that you don't think you were planning on going on. And I think a lot of that happened in this. It just
Yeah,
all started coming together.
that's good to know. You kind of just like follow your gut. I like that. I'll
Yeah.
remember that one.
Mhm.
So how do you balance honesty in storytelling while also protecting yourself emotionally and your family? And you went into this a little bit, but do you have anything else you want to share in regards to kind of balancing that?
Yeah, I had a rule, and that was don't let myself get in the way of myself. So I needed to be completely vulnerable, almost like I was not myself, like I was telling my story from someone else's perspective, like without any attachments. Like I
Mhm.
needed to be completely vulnerable and truthful with myself and how I feel about everything. Otherwise, this was just going to be some bullshit that is going to feel fake. And that was super liberating. And I started that on day one. That was just like, I just started talking. Like when I would write my VO, I would just start talking to a microphone, and then I'd get a couple words or a couple phrases that I felt like were truthful, and then I would build the rest around those truthful phrases. Like this wasn't like super contrived and me trying to like create a narrative of like who I am. Like it all was extremely organic, which is another reason why it took a lot of time because you're just like fishing around for truth, you
Mhm.
know? And
Mhm.
but yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a lot of me fumbling around in a dark room for months on end. That's
I
that's the
mean,
process.
it definitely doesn't seem like it. So you did
That's
a
good.
great job
That's
kind
good.
of putting it together. Do you have any regrets on sharing this story, or has it been pretty freeing?
No regrets. Super freeing. I feel like my family would say the same thing. No regrets and super freeing. Um, and there's more to the story that has not been told that I'm working on right now, and there's possible season two. I mean, I always felt like this show was a one season thing. Like what other story is there to tell? But there is more. crazy stuff that's going on right now that I can't and I won't get into. But like surprise, I'm just always surprised. My family is just full of fucking surprises. I'll tell you that. It doesn't end, and it drives you crazy. But once you embrace the crazy, then I got to do this again. So I'm ready to do it again.
Well, that's super. I mean, I want to say that's super exciting to hear. I mean, having a family that's full of crazy is never exciting, but I guess when it means you have more content to share, that's not necessarily a bad thing for you.
Yeah.
So,
And the sad thing is, I don't want to look at it like it's content because it's awful things.
right.
But yeah, I mean, I guess you make lemonade out of lemons, right?
You have to. There's no other way to survive, really. So, obviously, you've been incredibly open about how this journey has affected you and your family. And you touched on this, but it sounds like being vulnerable about it was a conscious choice from the start. You said, I have to go into this and just be as honest as possible. Did this evolve as you went deeper into telling your story?
No, because I set that ground rule on day one that I knew that what I needed to do. It's just more
Mm-hmm.
like I guess through the process you streamline it. You streamline how you're telling the story, and as the story comes together, the next step becomes a lot more clear. At the beginning of the story, it's just like, what do I do now? But halfway through it, it's like, okay, now I know what needs to come next, and it becomes easier. And because I've set the tone with my own vulnerability, it's easier for me to, I guess, uh, explain myself in those narrations a little bit better. And I'm more confident in them because I've built, a couple episodes already that I know are working, and I know what works, I know what doesn't work.
How do you feel like that level of honesty has impacted the listeners or the kind of feedback that you're getting?
Yeah, I think you can tell what's authentic and what's not. And when you come across real authenticity, it's inspiring no matter what it is. And that's why I'm getting all these crazy voicemails and emails from people who are inspired by the story. And people that, like, my brother's a great example too. Like, there's going to be a bonus episode that's going to come out a couple weeks after the eighth episode, which is the quote unquote finale.
Mm-hmm.
But he says something that I never heard him say before. He's like, I always thought people that went to therapy were pussies and they were weak. And he had a conversation with me where he was at a real low point, and I helped him, and we went to therapy. Like, I got him into therapy, and I like helped him mentally get there to prepare for therapy. And he went to therapy, and it changed his life. And like he's a huge proponent for therapy. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's scary to be vulnerable, but once you realize it's not scary, it's very healing. And I think people see that when they listen to the show.
Absolutely. And I think that that has a big impact on people like your brother who looked at it a certain way for so long. And they're like, oh, okay, well, you know, you went through something so life changing and traumatic and worked through it in a way that really helps you heal and it helps your family heal. It's like, okay, maybe being open and vulnerable isn't such a bad thing. It's funny. I just had a conversation with another podcaster who has a mental health podcast about men being more open with their mental health. And I think that's why I really wanted to talk to you because you are so open about it. And it's so refreshing because you don't get that a lot, especially from a man's perspective who's gone through something. And so I really appreciate that you are so open and vulnerable and you make these comments about how this story has impacted you personally, or you're like, yeah, this was really hard for me to hear, things like that. And so it makes you feel much more relatable, like totally understand why he would feel that way in that moment. And it makes people respond to it in such a more like positive and heartfelt way. And so I really appreciate that because
Thank you.
I think it can help a lot of people kind of come to terms with their own stuff and be more open with themselves and others. So I really love that. Do you have anything else that you want to say, or do you want to shout out where people can find the podcast and then the voice memo that you have set up so people can leave questions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love hearing from people, and I'm going to do several bonus episodes that are after episode eight. So don't be sad when episode eight is finished.
Yeah.
I've got a lot more stuff coming. But yeah, I would love to hear from more people and get more voice memos from people, because I'd like to play them on the show and respond to them and kind of like have a dialogue. So yeah, reach out, crookcountypodcast.com.
Thanks so much, Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
I've done criminal defense now for almost 37 years. It takes one guy out there to say, who's that fucking asshole Kyle who thinks he can just get on a goddamn microphone on a podcast and start publicizing this shit? Earlier this morning, detectives and federal agents invaded a junkyard in DuPage County, just west of Chicago. In keeping with the legendary MO of the Chicago mob, officials fully expected that they might find corpses inside the trunk of the automobile.
From iHeart Podcasts and Tenderfoot TV comes a new true crime podcast, Crook County.
I got recruited into the mob when I was 17 years old.
Meet Kenny, a.k.a. The Kid.
I ran whorehouses and I did hits.
An enforcer for the legendary Chicago outfit.
I wanted him to know I meant fucking business here. Put the gun back up to his forehead.
He lived a secret double life as a firefighter paramedic for the Chicago Fire Department.
I had a wife and I had 2 children. Nobody knew anything.
I always believed whatever he said, so I was not aware of his mafia involvement.
Dad was a fucking crazy bastard.
Welcome to Crook County, the true story of one man's life inside organized crime and his family left to pick up the pieces when it all went wrong.
You could see why he could be an enforcer.
People are dying. Is he doing this every night? Does he go out when they go to bed and they don't even know he's not even in the house?
Torn between 2 worlds.
Just when you think you're away from all this shit, I'm covering up fucking murders that these cops are doing.
Tearing him and his family apart.
I don't know why I deserve this.
Ken's gonna die one day, and now Ken's gotta sit in front of the big guy and try to explain his way out of this one. You know, where I had every fucking opportunity in the world to do the right thing, but I chose not to.
Ken is this great guy, and he's a legend, and...
Dad was a heroin addict.
He was a freaking crazy man.
We don't know who he is, really.
He is my father, and I had no idea about any of this until now. Welcome to Crook County, available now. Listen for free on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.